Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We are going to continue on with this week's theme of looking at music that makes us anxious, tense, stressed out, anything along those lines. We're going to be looking at a track called Anxiety Panorama today, which is one, seemingly perfect for the week, but also the idea of an anxiety panorama is very intimidating and not necessarily something I think I'm wanting to experience. And given that it is Law Dispute that we're looking at today, I'm thinking they're going to deliver on this rather well. Let's dive in though, see what they're bringing to the table today.
You plead for distance, I never change. Buried in behind the brightness spell, like poison in you. A poem against you, your ever anxious days. Buried in behind the brightness spell, like poison in you. And it causes you to shake, the shape of my mistakes. Buried in behind the brightness spell, like poison in you. A poem against your forehead, your ever anxious days. I felt afraid and ashamed and I felt anything at all. I felt you panicking, your shattering, your catastrophic fall. And I felt all gone, already so far gone, already anxious. You're shaking up, you're breaking down. I felt you all along. My pen encrypts your own pain, spills that poison in you. I'm pleading for forgiveness, how I failed so many times.
Yeah, using the
Your own pain in your ever anxious mind.
very crunchy, tense harmony there to build a feeling of tightness.
You plead to break your chain, our ever-changing life. To be buried from behind the darkness hides that brightest light. My hand against you, your ever-anxious mind will be buried in behind the poison spills that panic brings back. Image in my mind of that nightstand by your bedside, and the sharp edge you would swing to strike would break my hand instead. How you clattered all
I like the bass and the drums leading this section. The guitar is just this light handoff to the side. That feedback just kind of ringing off in the distance. Nice touch. Is that just drumstick hits? Like hitting the drumsticks together? I guess that's a easier visualization of that. And then just feedback. And the pouring of a cold drink. Fun fact, most people can tell the difference between the pouring of a cold liquid and a warm liquid. I don't think most people know they can do that, but you absolutely can. and you innately understand the difference. Anyways, that was definitely a cold drink being poured, or some sort of cold liquid crashing down into somewhere else. It didn't have to be like a drink or anything like that. So this is an interesting track. I think it does a great job of creating tension and release. In fact, most of the song, though, I would say leans towards an uneasy release, an uneasy type of stationary neutrality. Most of the song, when we look at the verses, when we look at the pre chorus, when we look at even parts of the outro there, it's drum and bass. The guitar, well, the bass usually gives us a nice, big, punchy, rhythmic element. Not usually something melodic, but it is something that takes the lead because everything else is kind of secondary as far as pitched instrumentation goes. The drums usually give us a nice backbeat. Sorry, a nice beat in the background of the song. It's different from a backbeat. And keeps the song pushing forward with a little bit of syncopation, but mostly just keeping that rhythmic flow in the background. What I find really interesting during those moments, though, is not necessarily the harmonic and rhythmic structures presented with these two instruments, but the guitar off to the right. It's just this nice, subtle guiding hand throughout the song. It doesn't necessarily present a strong melody. It doesn't really present too much of a harmonic structure. It's not foundational, but it is consistent, so it's not ornamental either. It sort of by itself tries to guide the song in an invisible way. It's quiet, it's tucked away to the side, but it absolutely helps the song retain direction, where the bass and the drum are really providing that momentum. And I think that's interesting. I think without it, the song would feel more static than it does. In these sections, though, there is an element of stress of some sort. I'm actually coming to this retrospectively. I don't think I felt this during the reaction itself because of something I'll get to in a moment, but it's the vocals. The vocals start off a little quiet, build, eventually add rasp to it. It's what the Law Dispute vocalist does. I don't know if this is the same vocalist that we've always heard, but if it isn't, then we have a vocalist who's attempting to do something very similar to the vocalist that I've heard a lot of in the past. I only say that because the spoken word has like a different uh, timbre to it than what I remember. And maybe that's just time, maybe that's a specific delivery here. I don't know. The harshes sound pretty close, but harsh vocals I think are easier to emulate than clean vocals, where you really have to match your your muscle usage and the concavity of your like throat and mouth and all of this to match somebody else's. I feel like that's a little bit more difficult to really capture that same uh, timbre and characteristic of sound. So, anyways, I don't know if the vocalist has changed or not, but it kind of sounds like it at times. Regardless, we have this build up. The clean vocals sound very uneasy, and when we bring in those compressed cleans or the yells or whatever they are, they definitely have a bit of tension to them, as Law Dispute always does. And that's kind of why I don't think I felt it too much during the song itself. When I think back to that full album from Law Dispute that we checked out, and I don't remember what album that is, but yeah, producer Bryan can figure that out and put a card up there for y'all. I kind of just locked into this being their style, and it kind of loses some of its uh, emotional weight because it is the status quo for Law Dispute. Sometimes I can fall into that more easily than other times. There's certainly some songs we've listened to, especially if the lyrics are easily heard, or if I have the lyrics nearby and I'm reading them as we go through, I can fall into the emotional weight of the lyrics better. But from a purely textural standpoint, it's just the sound I expect from them. It's like how black metal used to be very fatiguing to me, and now it's just the sound of black metal. I've kind of lost that emotional element to it because it's what I expect. It's just become the sound of the genre, or in this case, the sound of the band. But I think that when I kind of divorce myself from my expectations and approach it on a as in a vacuum as I can, there's definitely an anxious element to the vocal delivery that really isn't present anywhere else. And so I kind of wanted to approach that both ways because sometimes it's really good to, well, it's difficult to, but it's good when we can to notice our blind spots in media criticism and be aware of those so that we can attempt to overcome them. And I'm definitely someone who in the past have probably leaned on a misunderstanding of something simply because I didn't appreciate it in the way that it was designed because I had just become accustomed to that sound. So here I'm glad I kind of caught that, even if it was after the reaction itself. But I do think that's the most anxious part of the song, consistently anxious. Anyways, as I mentioned, the guitars, the bass, the drums, they all kind of take the energy down at times. Now there are two more sections I think that really lean into something a bit tense on this. One is this feedback that exists in several sections of the song. I think the first time I noticed it was in the post chorus, transitioning back into the verse. The guitar and bass are kind of doing their things. They were winding down an idea, but I don't remember exactly how they were winding down. And there was just those instruments off to the side, and then this humming, this guitar feedback, this sound, this drone existing in the middle of the song. And when I noticed that, I was like, I don't like that. And that's when I realized it's kind of a tense idea right there. I like how this was paired with the first intense moment, though. I mentioned that it was as if the sound was it was making me feel tense, making me feel very trapped and contained. There was a bit of noisiness. It was a harmonic element where the guitar and bass weren't really agreeing on what kind of chords we should be in, and there's a lot of harmonic tension and dissonance going on there. The vocalist was doing their yelling here, so we have the white noise of that compression in there as well. And the drums, I think, were throwing in some interesting rhythmic ideas. Not something too complex, but something a little more, had a little bit more depth than the more straightforward stuff we were seeing in the verse. This section felt very constrained, very tight, I think was the word I used. 100% panic attack, tightness, anxiety, tension. This is what the theme's all about this week. And I think this one moment really clicked for me. But it's these moments, that's what they are. A lot of the song has a sort of release to it. Again, it isn't total release. There's always something, some part of it that feels like we're teetering towards a darkness of some sort of feeling that we don't want to be within, but we don't really reside in those moments. It's almost the threat of moving into something more anxious, more tense, more of a tight feeling. But it's always on the periphery. We do fall into those at times. And I think this song, as I mentioned earlier, does a fantastic job of weaving those ideas together, of finding that tension and always making it something on the horizon if it isn't directly present at the moment. It's a song that doesn't always feel anxious to me, but always feels like it could easily slip into that. And I find that to be a really interesting a line to walk. There are multiple parts of this song when I was thinking, this is a good song for, an analysis, breaking down. I'm sure once we get to the lyrics, I've always enjoyed getting through the lyrical dives on Law Dispute. But there were multiple times I thought, is this really a good song for this week, though? Anxiety's in the title, sure, but is this an anxious song? And I think where I landed is that the threat of tension can be just as tense as those really tight moments. It really depends on the listener. And this is, this was a subjective theme, anyways. A lot of themes we do are fairly subjective. And I think those are sort of the best ones, too. They bring out the widest palette of music. I like the genre deep dives, those are always fun to do. But I think that kind of seeing a theme where we can have metal and hardcore and pop music all in the same week, those are my favorite kind of weeks. To really get, a little snapshot of a lot of stuff rather than hyper focusing on something, which is fun in its own right. It's just, geez, I'm a broken record at this point. I love contrast. And, but I'm thinking about it. I'm like, this is very subjective. There's elements of tension in it, but I don't really feel tense while listening to a majority of it. But I can certainly see how, like I mentioned, this looming presence on the outskirt of most of this song, always feeling like it could at any chance just fall and slip into this pit. That can certainly feel overwhelming, I think, to someone, even if it didn't quite capture me in that vibe. And I like that because it's a unique take on this. A lot of the songs we've listened to this week are just overwhelmingly tense from start to finish. I like this. It's a special kind of tension. The anxiety of what looms on the periphery rather than what is immediately in your eye line. And that's its own type of anxiety right there that really hasn't been presented this week. I think that about wraps this one up too. I like the layering on it, but it's still just the bass and the guitar. They have some cool moments, but a Law Dispute, they're really about building an atmosphere to put their poetry on top of. And while there might have been some interesting riffs in other Law Dispute tracks that we've checked out, what I feel with them is that it's really about understanding the atmosphere and then diving into the lyrics within that context. Because they're storytellers, I think, at the end of the day. They're not really a riff band. They're not really a melodic drumming band. They build atmospheres and they tell stories and they excel at that. So let's dive into some lyrics and see what's going on with Anxiety Panorama. And as expected, the poetry here is phenomenal. So I mentioned at the beginning that Anxiety Panorama was a term that made me not really want to get into the music. Panorama is a term to kind of focus on the concept of all encompassing. You can use it as like a not a metaphor, a synonym for like comprehensive. You may have noticed on your phone, in your camera app, you have panorama mode or panoramic photo mode, where you can start with one area and continue to rotate around until you have a 180 or 360 degree photo. You're trying to capture it all. So anxiety panorama is the concept of anxiety being everywhere. And that's exactly what the song is about. It's a relationship where somebody deals with anxiety in their life. They seem to have panic attacks of sorts, and the narrator is trying to assuage them, and it only makes things worse, and that leads to their own insecurities and tensions and stresses and anxieties to swell up too. We have two broken people, one trying to console the other, and both of them falling apart through this process. Verse 1 brings up a repeated phrase, buried in behind the brightness, spill like poison in you. This is an interesting phrase. Brightness is usually a positive thing, right? Light against dark. Usually one is viewed as the positive, one is viewed as the negative. But in this case, I really think that brightness is portrayed as an overwhelming state, that you're trying to return back to a normal amount of light and get away from a brightness, something that feels like it's blinding you. And so, this idea of this person being buried behind the brightness, that they're being completely overwhelmed, that it's difficult for them to get out of this anxiety, that they're in this stress. And the idea of something spilling like poison into you could be the narrator and whatever stresses they're feeling exacerbating the other person's anxiety. It spills into you like a poison. So this is repeated every other little phrase. So, like, we have you plead for distance, I never change, buried in behind the brightness, spill like poison. My palm against you and your ever anxious days, buried in behind the brightness, spill like poison into you. So, it's both a story, I think, of this specific moment. You plead for distance, but I'm not listening. I put my palm against you and your ever anxious days, and it causes you to shake. The shape of my mistakes, my palm against your forehead and your ever anxious days. So they're trying to console them, and it brings a closeness to them. You know, he says, my hand is literally against your forehead. All you asked for was distance, though. I really like that division between the wants of one character and the wants of another. And these wants could even be turned into needs. This person needs space. This person needs to feel like they're helping and contributing and saving this other person from their anxiety. All they need to do is back off. Maybe go do something else entirely. Maybe this person just, it's not just a physical space, but an emotional space too. Maybe they just need to be by themselves, and the narrator just cannot give that to them. It doesn't allow them to be a hero in the situation. The best way to help is simply leave, and they can't wrap their mind around that. And this just causes their two insecure, well, the anxiety of the other and the well, of the second character. The other sounds really bad. From the second character, and the what would we call it? Like the self need to save the day of our narrator. And their insecurities there too, I suppose. The anxiety and the insecurity is clashing, and it's only making both worse. Our narrator feels like they can't help anything, and that's making them feel worse. And the person who needs help just wants to be alone for a moment, and they're not getting that. Their anxiety is beginning to ramp up. And so we'll actually see. I've kind of jumped the gun a little bit with the narrator's insecurities. We actually see that in the chorus. It says, I felt afraid and ashamed that I felt anything at all. I felt you panicking. You are shattering. Your catastrophic fall. And I felt long ago already so far gone, already anxious. You're shaking now. You're breaking now. And I failed you all along. The idea of watching this other person fall apart, going into an anxious spiral, and feeling like you failed them because you couldn't help them out of the downfall, the spiral itself. I really like that first line too. I felt afraid and ashamed that I felt anything at all. The idea that you're going through this really difficult time and I'm the one who feels ashamed? What right do I have to feel anything at all in your crisis? Using words like panicking and shattering and catastrophic fall to oppose fear and shame. One of those definitely feels like it outweighs the other as far as severity of vocabulary. I think that does a great job of showcasing the mental state of or maybe the emotional state of the narrator, and how they feel like they shouldn't have had any response to this because it pales in comparison to the other person's experience at the moment. But at the very end, they feel like they failed the other person. We continue to see in verse 2 this idea of uh, pain spilling into poison, or spilling like poison into the other person. It says that they're pleading for forgiveness, that they failed so many times that it now competes with your pain in your ever anxious mind. So this person may have vocalized that they feel like a failure as a partner in this relationship, and now that's compounding on the other person's anxiety. They don't want them to feel like a failure, but now that weighs on them too. Yeah, this whole idea of broken people compounding each other's brokenness to where it impacts them all and makes the relationship toxic unnecessarily, unknowingly, maybe, is tragic in so many ways. Granted, we only have this snapshot of the relationship, but nothing in it really indicates that the two people are wrong for each other in any way outside of this base idea that their baggage compounds exponentially off of each other, and that their lives are worse for knowing each other, despite the fact that they're really not in a bad relationship aside from that. This is a toxic relationship not because one person is gaslighting the other or abusing them in any way. They don't work well together emotionally, and they're actually worse off for being in this relationship. And that is its own type of tragic element as well. It says, you plead to break the chain of our ever changing life, to be buried from behind the darkness. It hides the brightest light. All you want is change. You want darkness. You want to get away from this overbearing light. I think it's interesting to put darkness this way. Once again, light and dark typically are associated metaphorically with positivity for light and negativity for darkness. But I wonder if there's a double entendre here, that this other person wants to be buried in the darkness, to hide from that bright light. If that isn't, one, trying to get away from the brightness as an overpowering anxiety, but also that it diminishes their character. They would rather be cold and less emotional, which is probably not what the narrator wants in this relationship. They want someone to be emotionally open and vulnerable, as most people do in relationships. So I really like this use of light versus dark. Once again, my hand against you and your ever anxious mind will be buried in behind the poison that spills. That panic, it brings back images in my mind of the nightstand by your bedside and the sharp edge you would swing to strike. Would you break my hand instead? How you clattered all arrhythmically on that fixture on the wall where I caught you, silver cabbage moth, your powder left still lingers in my palm. It's the imagery, the word flow, the all of it, just poetic beauty. But the idea here too, bringing back this specific moment, I assume, of this person grabbing a sharp edge off of their nightstand and swing to strike. I don't think this is a literal memory. I think it's more of taking probably verbal jabs at our narrator as a way to get them to go away, showing how the relationship might have been fine before this, but the rising anxiety and stresses of these two people and their inability to deal with their own problems on their own, and the way that it's beginning to affect the relationship. He says, you swing a knife at me, metaphorically. Would you rather break my hand? Are there ways that you're trying to beat me down? And he says, I caught you though, when you clattered against the fixture on the wall, calling the other person a silver cabbage moth. Says your powder left still lingers in my palm. I don't know about the metaphor of the moth, but the idea of, I think moths have some sort of powdery residue. Some moths do, anyways. Maybe the silver cabbage moth does. Some of you insect, knowledgeable insect people in the comments, you can let me know what's going on here. But the idea of this residue of the person still lingering in the palm, I assume the relationship is over and they still feel so much about this. They still have so many memories about this relationship. They can't forget it. That powder's still here. We go into a pre-chorus before the final chorus that says, I was building landmarks for my errors in your scars. So they were trying to make themselves feel better by trying to fix the other person, trying to pretty up their scars, trying to build landmarks there, trying to put their mark on the other person for their mistakes. It's, again, kind of tying into that lack of self-esteem and kind of feeling bad for themselves and trying to make up for that in ways that aren't healthy. Even saying, I was wrong to start. I should never have treated you this way as a way to make myself feel better. As a, I was basically treating you as a canvas to improve my own self-esteem. And that's not the way to treat someone in a relationship. And once again, it's about, baggage and scars compounding off of the other person. And they were trying to fix their own issues, and it made the other person feel worse. And that ended up, you know, being something that was a wedge between the two people. It's just, God, I mean, this is good writing because it's real. It's not the typical, we had a great life and then you went crazy and now I hate you because we wasted so much time, and I was definitely I was the victim in this whole thing, of course. That's why I'm singing the song here. And nah, I mean, those songs can be cathartic, I think, but they're never real. Relationships are messy. There's more to it, and it's never one-sided. Rarely one-sided, I should say. And what I love about this is that it never really feels like either of these people were really in a position to be the one who destroys the relationship. Once again, it was just that they were a catalyst to each other, bringing out the worst in each other. And that makes it all the more tragic. If maybe they had taken care of their problems and worked on themselves before getting into the relationship, it might have never reached this point. But it did. That's how things worked out. The chorus, the final chorus, we have a bit of a variation on going back to the idea of feeling the other person's panic and their shatter, and watching them fall and all of this stuff, and feeling ashamed through all of this. But it says that after the catastrophic fall, it says, I felt that it's all long gone, and I said your name out loud, already anxious. I broke it all. I'll fix it all. I failed you all along. This idea of thinking it's something that can be fixed. And I really like that idea because his whole perspective is about building up, about trying to take something that has shattered, that has fallen, and building something out of that. Again, treating this other person like something that they can correct. Even the idea of building landmarks in your scars. Not about healing the scars, not about allowing the person to be who they are, to build something out of that. You've shattered, I'm going to build you back up. And that's not, one, it's not healthy, but two, it's not how you fix people. If I mean, fixing people is even the wrong word. I think that's one of the ways that language has failed us, is that the phrase of fixing someone, even if it's a professional, a psychologist helping you through things, you don't get fixed because you weren't broken to begin with. Even though that's sort of the colloquial phrase we have for this process is, broken people and fixing people and stuff like that. But that's really the wrong way to look at it. And I think it's a way that language is kind of, we've created that colloquial language in the wrong way. But it leads to stuff like this, trying to fix someone, trying to build them back up in your image, unfortunately, in the ways that are going to help you, and that's not the way to help someone else. And like he said, I failed you all along. It's not that I failed you right here. It's not that I screwed this up at the end. I was wrong the entire time. He says, my hands, this is how the song wraps up, my hands buried all the bad in you, and my hands never get it back. I like that. an understanding of how they screwed up in this relationship, while also understanding that it was, a not necessarily a failings on both people, but it definitely took both people to get to this point. Having the regrets of this while also understanding that it was a complex situation. And I think Law Dispute does a great job of handle complexity in stories. It's one of the things that I love about their lyrics. And this song does a fantastic job of creating a breakup song. This is definitely a song that you're going to feel bad about listening to. And if you've been in relationships like it, it's probably going to bring up a lot of emotions too. Um, it's a heavy topic, I think, handled with subtlety and understanding and a deft hand. And yeah, it's a lot of dispute, man. This is where they shine, and they continue to do that. These are my thoughts, though, on Anxiety Panorama. What are yours? Did you enjoy this? Is there anything in here that maybe I didn't dive into enough? I just realized half the video was a lyrical discussion. That's highly unusual. uh, do you have your own interpretation of things, though? Your own opinion on this? Please put all of that and any other thoughts you have down into the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. Alright, that wraps it up for this one. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.